Item number 8, public hearings. Hold a public hearing, waive first reading, and introduce an ordinance imposing a 4.93% solid waste collection and disposal rate increase requested by Recology San Bruno effective July 1st, 2010, as presented in the notice of proposed increase mailed to all property owners. Staff report, please.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. This item is a public hearing to introduce an ordinance for a 4.93% rate increase for garbage and recycling services provided by Recology San Bruno. Our franchise agreement with Recology provides for fiscal year 2010-11 a detailed rate year analysis whereby staff receives reports provided by Recology and determines, does an assessment, determines the accuracy of the calculations and the related proposed rate adjustments. Back in February, Recology submitted to the city a rate application with the proposed rate increase of 4.93%. The application provided information on Recology's revenues and expenditures and expenses for fiscal year ending September 30th, 2009, their latest fiscal year. Inflation-based indices are used, and they include the CPI for San Francisco, Oakland, San Jose, motor fuel index, and producer price indexes. These are all applied to various cost elements of Recology and are then tabulated in arriving at the computation of the rate increase. Now, this rate increase, while it's predominantly driven by these calculations, as I just indicated, they're also driven by one other significant event, which is the price of recyclables, which is a revenue line item for Recology. Those revenues actually declined substantially the last two fiscal years, and mainly because of market conditions. The prices of recyclables have come down substantially, and that obviously leads to a reduction of revenues for Recology, leaving obviously a reduction in overall revenues when we look at the aggregate. So that also contributes to part of the 4.93% increase of the rate adjustment that they're seeking. With this rate adjustment, as an example, a typical 32-gallon residential toter would increase from $22.34 per month to $23.44. This increase would take effect with bills produced after July 1st, of 2010. Obviously, that's also the start of our fiscal year. There was a subcommittee consisting of Mayor Rain and Councilmember Salazar that actually reviewed the rate application also. And as indicated earlier, staff also did the analysis of the application and the reports and the calculations that came with it. On March 23rd, 2010, City Council directed staff to proceed with the notification process to all the property owners related to the proposed changes of the garbage and recycling rates. On March 26th, these notifications were done in the form of a mailing to all the owners of the properties receiving the garbage and recycling services. A notification was also sent, published in the San Mateo Daily Journal on May 1st, notifying the public of the public hearing tonight. And if written protests against these proposed rates are presented by a majority of these property owners, then these new rate increases would not be imposed. As of this afternoon, we have received 10 written protests. So at this time, I ask the City Council to take public comment, and then staff is also available along with representatives of Recology to answer any questions on this particular item.
Any questions of staff at this time before we open the public hearing?
Through the chair, I've read all the protests, and in some cases there are questions and there are suggestions and stuff. And possibly staff and maybe Recology can answer this question in the interim. Is there a follow-up? I mean, whether or not the protest goes through, whether or not how we vote, I mean, is there some follow-up with these customers on their questions?
It has not been our past practice to provide a specific response to each of the comments that we receive. However, at the direction of the City Council, we certainly could do that, and/or the Council is always at liberty to evaluate any of the suggestions that have been made and direct staff and our franchise contract service provider to evaluate those recommendations, some of which I think were clearly articulated in some of the comments that we received and may well be something that would be worth pursuing. We would certainly be prepared to do that and report back to you.
Yeah, and you mentioned that because some people spent some time in reviewing the contract and spent some time, being very articulate and either in their argument or their suggestions, and so I think that would be a good idea.
Right. I'd like to say too that it seems to be three things here that we should look at. Well, one of the things that was kind of evident in the objections was emotion because the rates were going up. The other thing was some solid suggestions that really didn't have a lot to do with the rates, but solid suggestions about where things were placed and possible damage to sidewalks, curb cuts, and things like that. The third thing was the suggestion of real concrete things that may change rates in the future, like a smaller toter, which I'd like to pass by Recology this evening. So to get back to those inquiries with some response would be good.
Through the chair, in this case, because of the amount that we received, I guess it's feasible. If we go back in time to another time that we had more, I'm cautious about if we do consistently, because if we had several hundred, then in essence staff needs to get back to all those folks. So I just want us to be mindful of that with the staffing situation. But yes, in addition to what the mayor said, there was also folks saying, we're being more mindful, we're recycling. Really, I only need it bi-weekly. I don't need it weekly, or there's just me in the household, or whatever their arrangement is. And so I think some folks are asking, how can we encourage recycling and then we do more? We have less in our trash, and yet the rates go up. So what motivation or incentive is there as me as a homeowner or apartment renter to want to recycle and save more, when in essence it doesn't seem to, in some of their minds, help? And I think, what is the logistics bi-weekly? I know it could sound like a nightmare when you think about it, but some people feel technology is advanced enough that something can be done. Can we look outside the box to if everybody had 96 who needs it bi-weekly and a 32 for those that don't? I don't know, but these were some of the suggestions I think that came up that I think I would like to have the Recology see what their thoughts are.
Okay, if no more questions for staff, let's open the public hearing. Would anyone in the public like to address the council? All right, if you don't address the council now under public hearing and we close it, you will be precluded from speaking on this item any longer. Any action?
Move to close.
Second?
Motion to close the public hearing. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Any discussion among the council? Would they like to hear from the Recology folks?
I would.
Sure.
All right. See there's representatives here.
Good evening.
Good evening.
We'll take any questions that you would like to pose.
What's the possibility of a smaller toter, maybe a 20-gallon?
There is definitely a possibility of a smaller toter, and that is something we would be willing to discuss with the city, negotiate with the city. That is something that's new, that has just been introduced to surrounding cities such as Pacifica. So it is something that we would be willing to explore.
Okay. How about biweekly, so different kinds of service times and more staggered? Does that actually increase your cost because of the logistics of it, or tell us a little bit about that?
You're talking about like biweekly garbage service,
Right.
It's a state mandate that actually garbage cannot remain on a property for more than 7 days because of rodent infestation and things like that. If we went to biweekly recycling services, we can do that. It would require a larger can, which we'd have to redistribute to all the residents. They all currently have a 64, so that would be a cost that would be involved, is to reissue all cans. But there's definitely explorations. I don't know that it would reduce routes or head count and help with expenses, but we did mention about why recycle, because the rates are going up. Why should I continue recycling? We're hoping that the commodity market will come back at some point, and that your continued efforts in recycling and the increase in the recycling will hopefully someday bounce back and be more advantageous to the ratepayers.
And we are, as a city, recycling quite a bit. Is that right?
Absolutely, and we can only continue to recycle as we educate and re-educate and get out in the field and educate the ratepayers.
Okay, any questions for Ecology?
How are we doing as far as the large complexes, i.e. Shelter Creek? How are we doing as far as the city making its mandate that the state requires about meeting its goal, if you're aware?
Percentage-wise, I couldn't tell you what each of the complexes are doing, but I know that we go out often and go to the homeowners associations and educate all of the tenants on how to recycle. We look at the placement of the toters. If it's going to be more advantageous to move them around, will it increase recycling? Our recycling coordinator and team does go out to the multifamilies to help them out.
Any update on the city's meeting its requirement, or where we're at, or does staff know?
It's my understanding that the current results with the most recent AB 939 reporting process are favorable. I'm sorry, I don't have those details tonight, but we can certainly provide that to the City Council. You are probably aware that due to the formula that the state imposes that has a variety of different variables, some of them arguably not directly related to actual recycling and diversion of solid waste. We did experience a situation a few years ago where our recycling had dropped below the mandated 50% threshold. I believe that that situation, again, based on my most recent information from staff, has been fully rectified, and that in fact, as the general manager has indicated, the experience of recycling and the numbers of people who are recycling and the actual diversion of waste in San Bruno has been very strong for a very long period of time.
And finally, and it might be more towards staff or the other gentleman, what is driving the 4.97%? In lay terms, what is it, so that those may be listening, what is driving that increase that is necessary to make everything whole?
A combination of factors. Most of these are obviously costs associated with the operation. So for instance, labor cost is obviously a significant element of the operation, and that's is tied in by contract, by franchise agreement with the CPI. So that's the San Francisco, Oakland, San Jose CPI. So then that went up by 3.01% as an example. There's also vehicle-related costs, and that's tied into something called motor vehicle index. So that has another factor. And then finally, there are other costs other than the labor and the vehicle-related costs that's tied into the producer price index. And as an example, that went up 4.7%. And the other driving factor, the other element that also drove the rates up, again, was the reduced commodity costs for the recyclables. So that basically translates into lower revenues for the operations, for their operations, which obviously then puts pressure on the cost recovery, so to speak.
Okay, thank you.
Ken?
And on that subject, it's all calculated, right? There's
That's
all
correct.
formulas for all of this.
That's correct.
So it's not a desire of Recology to say, okay, we want this much more, something. So, and I remember last increase of last year, I believe it was 85 cents. It went up, I believe, just under $1, I think.
But yeah, it was about
Yeah.
less than 60.
Yeah. What I'd like to know is, there's two things, and reading some of these protests. But one thing in the staff report, and it just gets me on why in some of these other cities, not necessarily larger cities, but other cities that have more commercial, and the rate is almost half, or about a third less. And so I guess there's an obvious reason why a larger commercial base would reduce garbage rates.
Depending on their rate structure, the
Yeah.
commercial could be supplementing the residential rate dramatically.
Okay, and we don't have that in San Bruno.
No.
Okay, and I guess one thing is, I'm sure you've seen the argument is, how much did it cost to change your name?
It didn't cost the ratepayers
Okay.
anything for us to change our name.
Okay.
And that wasn't just Recology San Bruno, that was from NorCal to Recology.
That's right.
So that's a
It was
much
company-wide.
larger. Yeah.
Yes.
Michael, any questions?
Just one question regarding the city manager made a comment about our recycling rate creeping into the wrong side and then being able to correct. And I was wondering what the city did proactively to move the citizens in the right direction, if anything.
Actually, I may have confused you with some information that is only partially related to the good work that citizens in San Bruno are doing, related to what has traditionally and what continues to be a very strong rate of participation in recycling programs. The formula that the state uses to calculate our compliance with the state mandated 50% diversion requirement going back to the early 1990s is the baseline for the establishment of the regulations. And the state uses a very complex formula that has to do with economic indicators as well as actual tonnage diverted from landfills. So in the case that we dipped below the 50% threshold, it really was, as strange as it sounds, unrelated to, or only really very loosely related to, actual recycling. It was related to economic indicators in the region as a whole that then combined with the recycling rate, the formula came out to an amount that was less than indicated. I honestly don't know what changed, what piece of the factor changed in order that we were able to reestablish our compliance at over 50%, but I'm happy to get that additional information for the council.
I'd be curious to know. And another question directed at Recology. Are you aware of any programs maybe in other municipalities, whether Recology operates there or not, that are direct incentives to individuals to recycle more? Is anyone doing that, or is it even possible at that level to monitor what they're doing? What are they putting, which bin are they putting things in?
In our surrounding cities, there are not direct programs such as you're speaking of. I can definitely check other subsidiaries to find if there's programs, but in the surrounding cities, there are not programs that directly benefit individuals via their rate.
Okay.
So.
All right.
So just in following up, so my understanding is, depending on how the vote goes, is that we will get back to the residents who had protest letters with some of their suggestions, that some of the suggestions raised would maybe be explored by subcommittee staff or Recology. That I would also like to add that it'd be nice for the residents to know, what can we do as a community to keep our rates low? I think, gosh knows on the back of the rec guide, it was 10 reasons why you want to come back to San Bruno Cable or subscribe. I mean, why can't we have several or 10 reasons that things that we can do as a community that help keep our rates down, so that we can all be a part of it, we all know it, and we can all hopefully go forward together, and we won't be sitting here looking at more and more increases at various levels.
Any other questions?
one final comment,
Yes,
if I
Michael.
could. I just want to echo the sentiments of everyone who's sitting up here, and just thank everyone who did write a letter expressing their concerns. I think there were some really good things that were brought up, and I'm sure that the mayor and I will be addressing at least some of those in our subcommittee going forward.
Right. Okay, seeing no further discussion, any action?
Say, ordinance?
We'd like to entertain a motion to waive the first reading.
So moved.
Second.
Motion second to waive the first reading. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Introduction of the ordinance.
Through the chair, I'd like to introduce the ordinance for adoption.
Councilmember Ibera.
Aye.
Councilmember Salazar.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Medina.
Aye.
Mayor Ruane.
Aye.